G'day. How is everyone doing? Good to be with you this afternoon. This is the late afternoon when lunch is starting to tire you out, and I've been given the job of keeping you interested just for a few more minutes this afternoon. And I'm really glad to have a few minutes with some fellow TEDsters and to say something about what juices me as a human being and keeps me going. And just one quick comment about the video you just watched. It's a funny video, but you've got to remember I've been the lone nut who stood up and danced and no one's joined in. That can be very embarrassing. This afternoon I'm sandwiched in between Linda and Jen, and it's a place I'm very comfortable to be. They're women who I have known for about 8 years now, both of them. Women I admire very much, and they're both women whose lives have intersected with mine in lots of different ways over the last 8 years. In fact, if we sat down and talked about it, we'd probably discover there's all sorts of other connections that we're not even aware of at the moment. Now, I'd imagine if I picked anyone in this room today and we had a conversation, we would discover that we either know each other or we're connected by 1, 2, or I would suggest 3 separations at the most. Now, is this just chance that this is the case? Or is there some purpose behind the connectedness of life? Now, leaving aside the question of whether there's a design to the connectedness of the world, I want to suggest to you that it is a healthy way to live as if there is a purpose to the connectedness of all beings. And that's the way I choose to live my life. Nothing excites me more than to see the right people connecting at the right time, and most importantly, for the right purpose. When that happens, incredible things happen in the world. Whether it's 2 people falling in love or a group of people coming together and falling in love with a cause. These are the moments of life that are special. These are the moments when people come together around those conditions that the very famous quote of Margaret Mead is so true, that a small group of people who come together at the right time and most importantly for the right purpose can indeed change the world. Now, the reason I get excited about this and I want to speak to you this afternoon is that I'm passionate about 2 things in particular. The first is what I describe as inclusive spirituality, and the second is social media. I'm excited about inclusive spirituality because I believe there's an opportunity there to practice bringing people together across any boundaries of difference and working together for a common cause. So in terms of creating place or space, I'm interested in 2 spaces. The first space is the space where people come together and practice unity. The second space I'm interested in is the space of social media, and I want to talk a bit more about that. The metaphor that I want to use this afternoon is that of water. Now, water has long been an analogy for unity in diversity, and I suggest to you that this idea of a wave in the ocean is a metaphor that many spiritual traditions have used through the centuries, that every being is its own unique wave bobbing up and down in the sea and eventually making its own unique mark on the shoreline of life. In the end, each wave merges back into the whole ocean. And so waves in an ocean have become maybe the prime example of unity in diversity. But I want to take that a little further today in talking about water. You see, water's been the site of all sorts of miracles. In most of the religious traditions, there are miracles such as walking on water. And just in terms of a light-hearted approach, I want to suggest to you don't have to go very far to find the miracle of water. Have you heard of the Jesus lizard? Well, here's the Jesus lizard doing his thing. And the big question on my mind is, what's the Jesus lizard running away from? Whatever it is, this is just incredible. The real miracle is not the miracle of walking on water. The real miracle is the water itself. The properties of water. It is, in fact, a natural miracle. the great party trick, to be able to walk on water. But the real miracle is that over 3/4 of our body and 3/4 of the surface of the earth are water. It's the stuff of life. So let's think about the properties of water. When you think about the properties of water, you get to see a little of the miracle that is water. So we've got 2 parts hydrogen, 1 part oxygen. 2 things I want to point out about this. First is it looks like Mickey Mouse, a molecule of water, which is around about my level of understanding of the science of water. But 2 things about the molecule of water. The first is that it's the positive charge on hydrogen that attracts the negative charge in oxygen and creates the possibility of water. Now that in itself is very profound, proving once and for all that men are from Mars and women are from Venus, and more importantly that it's possible to cross over all the boundaries of difference, all those things that we've always thought were impossible for us to breach. We can do that, and it's possible for people to work together who are different, from different backgrounds, different traditions, different perspectives, and work together. Water shows us how it's done. The second thing about water is that there are all sorts of both strong and weak connections in the water molecule. So this positive-negative charge between hydrogen and oxygen is a relatively strong connection. But the connection between 2 hydrogen atoms is a far weaker connection. So you want to think of the hydrogen and the oxygen connection in the water molecule as being like a long-term committed relationship. But you want to think of the weaker connection between 2 hydrogen atoms as being more like a casual acquaintance, or maybe a work colleague. And when you put 2 molecules of water up against each other, they may connect for a while, they'll disconnect, and they'll come back together. So you might think about that as like an on-again, off-again relationship, or a one-night stand, or maybe a Larry King marriage. Always coming together, finding each other, then moving away again. Some very profound things come out of the science of water. And I want to point them out to you now. You see, when I think about this, it inspires me to look for these connections, some of which are strong, some of which are weak, and to find them in all sorts of places. Now, one of the miracles of water is that when you raise the temperature, it's actually the strong connections that create boiling point for water. Now, think in that regard about a long-term couple in passionate embrace. And yet at the same time, it's the flexibility of the hydrogen atoms which creates the possibility for the water to lower its temperature and to create what looks like, when you look through a telescope, an ice crystal lattice. And I offer you this afternoon the lattice as a symbol for the structures that hold together the connections around which we can experience the miracle of unity. It's the lattice. Now, the lattice aren't the connections themselves. The lattice is the structure that holds the connections. So some of those structures include technology, social media. You could also include TED itself in that as a structure, religions, synchronicity, bricolage, which is my absolute favorite word, and bricolage simply means an odd collection of things that come together in a seamless way. All sorts of structures around which we can create connections. And they're all on this lattice. Now, what happens when beings interact with each other on the lattice, which is life? We end up with a vine, where different vines will intersect with each other, weave in and out of the lattice to create the living, self-organizing unity that we all appreciate so often in our lives. I want to say something about social media, because social media has become a very significant part of my life,
And the reason it's become a significant part of my life is because of this idea of strong and weak connections. Now, I'm imagining, like many of you, Facebook for me is one of my strong connections. That's where I mix with my friends and my family and maybe friends of friends. But if I'm looking for reach, if I'm looking for new connections, then I can't go past Twitter or LinkedIn for the weak connections. And you see the point, they're both important, the strong connections and the weak connections. Now with the addition of fan pages on Facebook, now I'm starting to explore the weak connections also on Facebook. But both are important, the strong and the weak. Now so many different parts of life are impacted by this distinction between a strong and a weak connection, whether it's a job search or a marketing campaign, a missing person, looking for information on any area, or maybe it's a compatibility test where people are looking for each other. All of these are impacted by this idea of a weak connection. You see, if you think about a lattice, you may know 5 people very well. They're your strong connections. But it's the one person you don't know very well who's hovering just at the edge of your strand of the lattice, who that person in turn is connected to another group of 5 strong people, who in turn is connected to another group. That's where you get the depth of connections and the reach. And this is why it's such a profound idea. But it's not just personally significant. I want to outline just a couple of very important points in my life in terms of why this is such an important idea. And the first is that we are all related. Now we know this to be true, we've experienced it in our life, but even beyond our understanding, we are connected, and it's the essence of the possibility of coming together to work in the world at something which brings unity. The second is this idea of shared wisdom. Now I don't know how often in my life I've been surprised by who has been my teacher or my guide. Often it's the surprising people who come to you and bring something to you didn't know they had to offer. And this idea of the small world reminds us that there's wisdom in all sorts of places. Very often you don't even know whether you're giving or receiving in this small world. The third idea I've already mentioned to you is that when the right people come together at the right time, and most importantly for the right purpose, incredible things happen. So with a high degree of self-awareness and mindfulness, we can indeed seek and attract the right people at the right time and for the right purpose. Compassion is a central idea that comes out of this notion of the small world, because we're discovering more and more that your actions affect all others. What affects one affects all. So this is not a narcissistic idea that I get to enjoy the small world. This is something that actually drives me to empathy and to believing that I am connected to other people. With this notion of a small world, we grow to believe that there's no end point, that the way we speak and the way we act has implications beyond our understanding, beyond our awareness. In fact, there's no expiration date on an action. It'll keep traveling around the lattice of the world, weaving in and out of different people's lives and different situations. Now, this next one is a really significant point that I think we're growing to understand, that the small world encourages forgiveness. It encourages experimentation and a willingness to step out and try things, because we're learning again and again that there's actually no such thing as failure in a small world, because we don't know the end point. There's always more. Networking, I've spoken a bit about that. Nurture the strong ties, but also give a good amount of time to the weak ties as well, because that's where the strength of the network comes. And then finally, believing that your actions make a difference. We get to the point where we know that if our positive thoughts and words and actions spread, there's no reason why they can't become viral. So let me wrap up with a personal story. I've got 15 seconds to tell you this story, and this will give you an idea of why this is so important to me. When I first joined Facebook, someone friended me. I didn't know this person. I accepted the friendship. We had a little bit of contact over some time, but one night she wrote to me and she said her life had become so desperate that she wanted to end her life. So we got on Facebook chat together, and I was able in just a few minutes on Facebook chat to remind this woman of something she already knew, which is that she's not alone. That wasn't a great skill of mine. There was no mastery of mine that led her to this. It was just the simple reminder that Facebook as a structure allowed us to have. Facebook itself is a reminder that we're not alone. And I was able to remind this woman that she was not alone. And now I enjoy the opportunity of seeing her posts from time to time and seeing that she is now thriving in her life, thriving because of connections. Now, social media is not perfect. Technology is not perfect. None of the elements of the lattice are perfect. But if we live mindfully and wisely, it's possible that we can use all of these structures to deepen our connections and, more importantly, to melt some of the ice that exists between people and groups for a greater purpose, that we can build a level of peace and understanding that the world has never known. And that is why I am excited by the small world connected to everything, every living being that there is. Thank you.